seat. Kids, you guys are free to go to the kid zone, so if you want to head on out. I know you're doing like a Where's Waldo Jesus edition, which is kind of awesome. And if adults like sneak out the back, I understand. I'm not mad. But again, welcome to Living Faith. This is your first time here. I wanted to let you guys know we have a Living Faith app, so you can search Living Faith Indy in the App Store. Follow along with the stuff that we're going through today. Also, we'll have some verses on the screen for you. But today we're continuing our sermon series. We're going through the culture of Christmas. And during Christmas, we like to kind of tone it down a little bit. Like, as you can tell, there are not nearly as many people in the room. And everyone's kind of just like, it's just chill. You know, like things are just a little bit easier and a little bit more calm during Christmas. So the sermon series we're going through, we're just looking at the different cultures around the world and throughout history and how they celebrate Jesus and what we can learn from that. Cody started out a couple weeks ago talking about the early church and how they celebrated Christmas and how they basically didn't. They just aren't super into birthdays, which I get. You know, some of our older people feel that way, me included. But they just celebrated Jesus in everything they did through being deeply devoted, radically generous, and just people of praise. And then we had John Dimmick speak last week and talked about just what it was like from the early church until today and how a lot of our kind of Christmas lore came to be, you know, and how I'm going to get this wrong, the 4th century Pope Julius I chose December 25th as the day that we celebrate Jesus' birthday. And it was essentially just to kind of outdo the pagans and try and steal the winter solstice from them and be like, well, if you're going to do this, we're going to do that. And for better or worse, that's where we're at today and why we celebrate Jesus' birthday in December. And he talked about Martin Luther and how a lot of the different Christmas tradition we have today came from him. And I love taking a look at history, which is kind of what we're doing here, looking at just different people and how they do things differently. And it's kind of interesting, I think, to see like how things started in history and then how they are today, you know? Because it's funny, like there's so many things that we think we invented that we just didn't, you know? Like there's a lot of things that we're super like, oh, this is how we do it. And then we realize where it came from and we're like, oh, we have no clue what we're doing, you know? But I also love just looking back at history of where things came from. We realize that the world is kind of like a giant game of telephone, you know? Like 2,000 years ago, this is what Jesus did. And today we're like, look what Jesus did. It looks like this. And then you go to like Rwanda and it's totally different, you know? Or you go to Kenya and it's totally different. Or you go to Vietnam and it's totally different. And like I love that we have those cultures represented here in the Philippines. And like it's cool that everyone not from America is like, don't talk to me. So it's cool seeing all these different cultures kind of coming together into one thing, you know? And today I think we have the same thing. Like we have the same history of 2,000 years ago, Jesus did this. And today like most Christians have kind of adopted Christmas as the day that we focus on Jesus. But we do it in drastically different ways, which is really cool. And I think there's a lot we can learn from that. And there's a lot we can learn from just being from different places and having different backgrounds. So today we're talking about different Christmas traditions around the world and how we can adopt some of those and really just meet Jesus in that place and just be different because of that. So before I get to the good stuff, though, I want to talk about some of the funny stuff and some of the bad stuff, okay? Because there's Christmas traditions all around the world that are so incredibly different than what we do. So we're going to start with just the worst one possible, okay? We're just going to dive right into the deep end. The worst one, I think, of all of these is in Central and Eastern Europe, and it's a thing called Krampus. Have you guys heard of Krampus? Who's heard of Krampus? About half-ish? Okay, yeah. You'll be blown away that this is a real thing that people in Eastern Europe do. So Krampus is a half-goat, half-demon god thing. Yeah, I know, right off the bat, you're like, oh, okay. Yeah, and basically, Krampus terrorizes children. It's like the reverse Santa. So the history of it actually goes that they say every December 5th, and I'll get to that in a little while about why December 5th, but Santa comes into a house with Krampus, And Santa gives good things to the good kids, and Krampus whips the bad kids with birch rods. And they're like, Merry Christmas, Krampus is coming. And it's like a real thing. It's not a real thing, but it's a real tradition that people actually like celebrate and think about. To the point where there's a lot of different cities in Europe where every year they have a thing called a Krampus run, where a bunch of guys from the community dress up as Krampus and run through the city trying to scare people and like hitting children with sticks. And they're like, let's bring our kids to the Krampus run. And it's just a thing. I'm getting a lot of like crazy stares, but also Halloween. Like, is it that different? You know, like we do some of the same things. What? Yeah, that's true. Well, maybe you're going to the wrong Halloween party. I don't know. No, but there's all these crazy things. There's this YouTube channel that Autumn and I watch called Kara and Nate. It's this couple that like travels all over the world. They've got a video from like 2 weeks ago where they went to a Krampus run, if you want to see it. It's really, really interesting. And it just kind of like starts to go downhill from there. I said that was the worst one. This one might be worse. I don't know. In Sweden, there's this thing called the Gävle goat. The Gävle goat is this giant thing that they build in the middle of town in Gävle, Sweden. And it is a 3-ton giant goat made out of wood and like straw. And it's built after the Norse god that's the demon goat of Yule. So it's like the Yuletide or the Yule log thing. This is the demon goat that's behind all that in Norse mythology. And they build this giant thing. And it started in 1966. And this is a really interesting kind of funny history. Yeah, it's a relatively new one. So they build this giant goat, and it's the fire department that puts it on every year. So the local fire department builds this giant thing, and the first year, somebody burnt it down, which is super ironic. I don't know if it was somebody who's like, this will be funny, or if they're like, down with the demon thing. I don't know what happened, but it burnt down, and now it's just like a thing, and apparently every year, this little town in Sweden, there's like this giant battle between the firefighters and the arsonists. And they try to burn it down while the firefighters try to keep it from getting destroyed. And if it gets destroyed before a certain date, they rebuild it. And if it doesn't, then the arsonists win. And it's like this thing. I know. Look it up. It's hilarious. There's actually a Wikipedia page that lists every single year and whether it got destroyed or not. 38 out of the last 57 goats have been destroyed. And the one this year to date it's listed as damaged by birds. So apparently a flock of birds came and started picking it apart, and that's their big thing. In India, there aren't many Christians in India that celebrate Christmas, but there are some, but they don't have any fir trees because it's a really hot climate. They've got banana trees and mango trees. So they actually just go out to a random banana tree or a mango tree and like decorate it like it's a Christmas tree. So there's all these like clumps of bananas like within the Christmas tree. It's really cool, yeah. And apparently mango leaves are really huge in India, so people actually take mango leaves and decorate the inside of their house with mango leaves for Christmas, which is really kind of interesting. Japan, this one might be my favorite. Japan every year, in honor of the American holiday Christmas, they all go to KFC. Yeah, it's like a real thing. I looked it up. It's mind-boggling. It is on my bucket list to spend Christmas in Japan and go to KFC. Apparently, there's an estimated 3.6 million people that eat at KFC every year on Christmas Day. And you either have to order chicken weeks ahead of time or stand in line for hours to get KFC on Christmas. I know, it really is. I don't know who thought that idea up, but Australia is a really funny one too. Their Santa is like a summer Santa because Christmas is right at the beginning of summer break. So every year they have pictures of Santa with a surfboard. So like if you search Santa here, it'll be Santa on a sleigh with snow. There, it's Santa surfing. And they have a bunch of surf competitions for Christmas Day with Santa where they dress up as Santa. They also, like, what most people do for Christmas is they go out to a beach and have a giant community barbecue. Or they go camping, which is their Christmas tradition, which is interesting. In Greece, I don't know if I'm going to say this right, but this one's crazy. They celebrate the 12 days of Christmas in Greece and all. There's a few different countries that do that, celebrate a full 12 days. We don't really know what that is. We just sing that one song. But they believe in the evil Kallikantzaroi spirits. And these spirits come up from the center of the earth, and they get into people's homes through their chimneys. So they keep a fire going for all 12 days just in case these spirits come in their chimneys. This is where it gets really weird. They burn old shoes because the smell of the old shoes will keep the spirits away. So anytime they have old shoes, like they throw their Nikes in a corner, and every Christmas they burn all their shoes. Which I'm sure when shoes were made out of leather and stuff wasn't that bad, but now that it's just like plastic and foam, I can't imagine that they don't have some really weird headaches and things. So there's another country where they have these creepy little elves that they put in their houses that watch children and report back to Santa all the terrible things they've done, and they plan out how to punish children with Santa, and they're called the Elf on the Shelf, and that's here, and you've got to admit that's creepy, right? Like, yeah, you convince your kids that they're real and that they're watching you, and you like move them every day to get the kids to think that they're actually like real alive elves who are watching them. Yeah, it's somewhere somebody is talking about this in another country and looking at other culture things, and they're like, they've got these creepy little elves that they say are real, like they're demonic little, I don't know. So there's all these funny things that happen all the way around the world, right? And I think we have to realize, like, I'm going to get to the real ones that we can really learn from, but even with these, I think we have to realize that these things are really believed by somebody, and they might not be fully believed, but they're a little bit believed, or it's something that they kind of do because everyone does. And I think this brings up the question in us, like, what are we doing that we're just like, oh, that's what we do? But we've never actually thought about why. How many people in Gävle, Sweden are like, oh, it's the goat. And then they're like, oh, this is a demon from Norse mythology, and like that's creepy, Like how many things do we do in Christmas that are just fun and just simple, and we're like, oh, it's nothing. And we look at where it came from and what it really means, and it's kind of disgusting, And I think we have to kind of search ourselves and see, like, what should we do? Because if there's anything Americans are good at, it's continuing the symbolism and completely missing the point, Like so much of what we do is just adopting and working with just like, oh, this is this thing we do, just the symbolism, and we miss the point of what's actually happening. So that said, there's a lot of Christians that have traditions around the world that have completely not missed the symbolism, and they understand the point of who Jesus actually is and what he's actually doing. And I want to look at some of those countries and look at some of those things happening because I think there's something we can really learn from. And the first one we're going to look at is in Turkey. So actually at the time it was in Greece. It was called Myra, Greece, but now it's in modern day Turkey. And the first one on the like what to do list, not the like what not to do list, believe it or not, is Santa. The background of where Santa came from is actually really incredible. The Santa that we know was invented by Coke in the 60s. Like the whole idea of like a fat jolly guy with the big beard and like a fuzzy hat and the like reindeer and sleigh and all that, most of that was actually like personified in the way that we see it by Coca-Cola, and it was just this big campaign of like Santa drinks Coke, which is really funny, and the whole like polar bear thing and all that. Like Coke is just great at marketing. But the real story of Santa happened in the 3rd century. And the guy who we know as St. Nicholas, was actually a really incredible God-fearing man. And the more you look into his story, the more you're like, this guy is incredible. Like he really is amazing. And he was a Greek bishop, and he was born into a whole lot of money. Like his family just was very wealthy, and both of his parents died when he was pretty young from an epidemic. So he just has all this money and was like, I've got no one in the world, and he turned to Jesus. And he gave his life to God. He really just started to press into who God was. And Jesus became very real for him and really just connected with his heart. And he started reading scripture, and all these different verses just jumped out to him as like, I should actually be doing these things. And one in particular that I saw come up multiple times is Luke 12. Luke 12, 33 and 34. It says, sell your possessions and give it to the poor. Provide purses for yourself that will not wear out, a treasure in heaven that will never fail, where no thief comes near and no moth destroys. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. And this guy, St. Nicholas, took this seriously. And he was like, I have all this money. I should sell everything I own and start giving it away. And he just did. Like, he didn't care about the next generation or what his kids, he didn't have kids. He was just like, everything is about Jesus. And everything was about impacting the poor and impacting people with the gospel. And he started living this thing out so much to the point that everyone would kind of just go to him for help. And obviously, the whole sainthood thing happens later. It's not like he was like, I'm St. Nicholas, here's money. He was just Nick. Like, he was just this guy, this bishop that everyone had a lot of reverence for, and he just loved Jesus. And there's one story that is really incredible that turned into a lot of kind of the folklore that we know today of Christmas, where he had all this money, and he found out about this poor guy in town who couldn't feed his family, and his kids were dying. And he had 3 daughters, and he actually decided to sell them into slavery so that they could live. Like, it was literally either they stay with me and they starve to death, or I sell them into slavery, and at least then they have food, they have life. Somebody's going to keep them alive. And St. Nicholas, the story goes at least, is that he found out about this, and he put a bunch of gold in these sacks, and he wanted to get it into their house without them knowing where it came from. So in the middle of the night, he went up and threw it in the chimney. And he threw it in the chimney, and they had socks hanging up on their fireplace that were drying. And a bunch of the gold bags broke open, and gold went everywhere, and a bunch of them landed in the socks. And that's where the whole stocking thing comes from. That's at least the story. It was from the 3rd century, so who really knows, But at the end of the day, this guy understood the gospel. And he understood that Jesus came for everybody, no matter how much money they had or who they were or the way that they lived. And he was like, I'm going to take this scripture to heart, and I'm going to live it. And because of that, we have this crazy, Santa story even today, 1,700 years later, which is so cool. And from there, I think we see a lot of different Christmas cultures or Christmas cultural things come out of that, out of loving the poor and out of investing in people that everyone kind of looks away from most of the year. And one of my favorite stories of that is in England. So my wife and I, Autumn, lived in England for a little while. She was there for about 2 years, and I was there off and on for those 2 years. I couldn't get a visa. Long story. But during Christmas, I got to spend one Christmas there, and Christmas in England is just different. I love it. It's very similar. There's a lot of overlap with the way that we do it. But a lot of the Christmas tradition things that we know about but have not experienced actually come from England. And I remember when we lived there walking through downtown Sheffield, through the city center area, and there's all these Christmas markets everywhere. It's really cool. They just set up tents and things and sell stuff outside. They sell this thing called mulled wine. It's not moldy wine, it's mulled, M-U-L-L-E-D. They add a bunch of stuff to it. It's spice cider wine. They've got spice cider they sell. They've got chestnuts roasting on an open fire. That. Has anyone ever seen a roasted chestnut? You've seen one? At Buc-ee's. Speaking of cultural Christmas, Buc-ee's in Texas. No. But yeah, roasted chestnuts are gross. They smell like dirty feet, and they taste exactly like that also, I would assume. But roasted chestnuts are this thing. They've got mince pies that came from minced meat pies, and now they're just a whole bunch of other stuff. I don't even know what's in them. They've got this yearly Queen's speech that I guess now is the King's speech, and everyone in England all listens to them speak on Christmas Day. There's this whole thing. There's these things called Christmas crackers, where you have these little paper things where you like pull them apart and they pop open, and there's this little dumb like crown, like a paper crown that everyone wears. There's a whole bunch of really cool things like that. But hands down, my favorite thing about Christmas in England is the day after Christmas. It's called Boxing Day. Yeah, Boxing Day. It's not like punching people in the face. Yeah. Oh, Brian. Brian's like, man, I'm going to England. Oh, you get a crown for nothing? You don't even get to punch anyone? So Boxing Day is the day after Christmas, and basically you get all of your toys and all of your presents and all your stuff from Christmas, and the next day, the stuff that you think you can give away to somebody else, or the toys you got last year or whatever, you box up and you take to kids that didn't have a Christmas. A lot of people in England call it Poor Christmas, which is not exactly the heart behind it originally, but I kind of get where it comes from. And there's so many things that embodies, but especially Acts 20, verse 35. It says, "In everything I did, I showed you that by this kind of hard work, we must help the weak, remembering the words the Lord Jesus himself said, that it is more blessed to give than receive." And I love that it's like built into their culture to give. Like not just to your family, because it's really easy to buy your brother or your mom or your son or daughter or whatever a present, right? Like that's how we do it. But how often at Christmas do we think, I'm going to buy something for someone that has nothing? How often do we think, I'm going to give this thing to this kid who didn't have Christmas? And I love that that's built into their thing. And for the 15 years that my wife and I have been married, every year we've done Boxing Day. We're like, that's one of the things that we're going to take and we're going to do as a family. So every year our kids pick their favorite toys from the year before or from when they were younger, and they clean them up and they box them up to give to somebody else as a present, which is a fun thing to do and something that I think all of us could do. And then we've got Belgium. Belgium is a tiny little country, but they've got some really cool things they do. They also do this in the Netherlands, but they have like 2 Christmases, which is really interesting. They have one Christmas on December 5th, or December 6th, so 5th is like Christmas Eve and the 6th is Christmas, and they call that St. Nicholas Day. And St. Nicholas Day is essentially what we do for Christmas, where it's like we buy our friends and family gifts and we sit down and we have a fun, like, let's hang out, let's do Christmas. And that kind of kicks off the Christmas season for everyone in Belgium. So the first day of Christmas is Christmas Day, which is kind of cool in itself, too. And then the last day of Christmas is December 25th. And December 25th is completely about Jesus. So all the fun, cultural, like the corporate stuff that we think of when we think of Christmas starting in, what is it now, September, where you start to see stores where all the Christmas stuff is being sold. That stuff all happens completely separate from the day that we celebrate Jesus. And there's a really cool, firm separation between those things, which I don't think we have to do, but I think there's something powerful about being like, yes, we're going to celebrate, we're going to have fun, we're going to embrace this cultural thing. But also there's a moment where we talk about Jesus. And we celebrate Jesus, and we look at who he is. And I love that this year, Christmas Eve is on a Sunday. So I'd encourage you guys, come to our Christmas Eve service in Irvington next Sunday night at 5, because that's when we just get to focus on Jesus. The next day, we can do all the crazy stuff. We can do all the fun stuff. We can give presents and all that, but let's just take a minute to focus on Jesus. And I love, this verse came to my mind in thinking about this. Mark 12:17. And this verse is usually used talking about tithing. It's give back to Caesar what is Caesar's and to God what is God's. And I think there's so many different places where this comes into work, where the things that are cultural, the things that are just the things that all Americans do it. That's fine. Like there's nothing wrong with that. But give to God what is God's. And our attention, I think, to a certain point has to be just to give God the thankfulness that he deserves and take this season, take this time to focus on Jesus, because that's what this is really all about. And when we talk about focusing on Jesus, there's one country I think that does it super, super well. It's the Congo. Has anyone been to the Congo? No? So I've never been to you've been to the Congo? All right. I was going to say, we've got 2 people from Africa, no? Okay, great. Yeah, it's right next to you, yeah. So the Congo is a really cool country. When Autumn and I lived in England, we rented out a church building, and there was a bunch of church plants in a row that would rent out this building, and the one right before us was Congolese. And every single Sunday, we would come to set up, and they were finishing their worship. And their worship was the church in the middle and a drum circle of drums around the church. And that was how they did worship. And it was so powerful and so cool. And Congolese do such a great job of combining what Jesus has done with their own culture and not just being Americanized like so many cultures. And they do this thing for Christmas that's really cool, where every year they have this kind of parade that goes through town of people singing Christmas carols. And it's not like here where we sing Christmas carols door to door and they're like, oh, thanks, and we go back inside. As the carolers come to your door, you join them and you walk with them to the next place. And it becomes this massive group of people. Is this done in Rwanda too? Okay, cool. It's such a cool thing. Like, they just walk from place to place. And one thing that I really appreciated that I thought was cool is as they do this, they make sure to walk in front of every missionary's house in the town as just reverence of you brought us the gospel, which is really cool. Like, just focusing on like the spiritual mothers and fathers that have invested in them. And they go from place to place singing, and everyone goes to church for a Christmas celebration. And the thing that really like got to me, which is cool, is that no one shows up to Jesus' birthday without a gift. And they don't give gifts to each other, they give gifts to Jesus, to the church. And they come up, and during the service, there's like a gift-giving time, just like a birthday party, where they come up and they put their gift on the stage. And sometimes it's money, sometimes it's just like a thing that they have that they care about. Like, I'm sure there's just like a whole bunch of knickknacks that show up from kids. But there's not one person that comes that doesn't bring a gift for Jesus because it's a birthday party. And they celebrate, and then after their service, they go back to their homes and they have a Christmas dinner outside of their house in front of their house. And they like do a barbecue or whatever. They cook outside and they invite friends and family over. And then as they're eating, their neighbors just kind of come over and you just kind of pick around different food of different people in the neighborhood, which is really cool. There's just this community aspect of it. And there's so much that I love about this. You know, the honor that they show their spiritual parents or the people that have invested in them, and the fact that everyone just walks together to the birthday party and they do it kind of like a birthday party. The love offering that everyone gives, they call it their love offering, and then just the community of it. And I think it like really well mirrors the thing that we see in Luke 1 of Mary talking about what it was like to have Jesus inside of her, you know, to literally have this baby Jesus. And she says, my soul glorifies the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God my Savior, for he has been mindful of the humble state of his servant. I love that the Congolese people just show this. And the last one I want to hit on here is China. China, for the last 20 or 30 years or so, has had Christianity growing like hugely. Like, it's been one of the places with the most growth in the church for the last couple decades. And a lot of that was completely underground and it had to be hidden from the government. And then for a little while, the government was like, this isn't a bad thing. For about, 8 to 10 years, the Chinese government was like, okay, this might be okay. And then in 2018, it completely flipped. And the government was like, no, we're cracking down on this. This isn't going to happen under our watch. So for that season where Christianity was starting to grow, they actually started to allow Christmas celebrations just like in the community. And actually all these big malls in China would have giant Christmas trees as like an ode to an American celebration, you know? Kind of like we do Chinese New Year, but we have no idea what we're doing, you know? like during Chinese New Year, there's like a dragon. You're like, oh, that's nice. But you have no idea what Chinese New Year actually is, you know what I mean? That's how they did Christmas. And they would have Christmas carols and they would give out apples. Because the word for apple in Chinese is really similar to the word for peace. So they would hand people an apple and basically say peace. You know, like they would just hand out peace to people in public, which is really cool. And they sang a song that was Quiet Night that didn't quite translate well. So they'd sing it quietly and be like, quiet night. And it's just funny. But in February of 2018, like I said, the Chinese Communist Party instituted a thing called the Religious Affairs Regulations. And a lot of what they were trying to do was do away with house churches. They wanted to get rid of any church that didn't sign a covenant with the government and have everything they said filtered through the government. And the Chinese government, I think in the 70s, wrote a version of the Bible that changed about 30% of the Bible, that changed it to be what they wanted to say, to be able to kind of squash the people that were learning the gospel. So this 2018 thing made every other version of the Bible illegal. And while they do still allow Christmas celebrations to happen, they can only be members of the church who were already members of the church. And they have to close their blinds completely so no one from the street can see what's happening inside. And they have basically shut down this caroling service that the Chinese people love to do. So every year they have this caroling service, and there used to be lines outside of churches down the road because they wanted to experience this cool cultural American thing. And since 2018, they're like, no, this isn't happening. And because of that, the Chinese church has said, I don't care, we're still doing it. And there's been a lot of Chinese pastors and a lot of church leaders who have been put in prison. They actually, in China, call prison their seminary. And they don't usually trust a pastor unless he's been through prison. Like, when a young pastor is doing his thing and he hasn't been arrested yet, they're like, oh, you'll figure it out. When you go to prison, you'll get this. It's a totally different thing. And the Christmas traditions have not stopped. That's the really cool thing. They've actually been signing into VPNs and doing Christmas caroling services over Zoom. And what it's caused is, it's actually caused the churches that would be a pastor or two with 100 people. They're like, if we have 100 people on a Zoom call, we'll get found out. But if we have 8 people on a Zoom call, we can get away with this and call it a business thing or whatever. So it's actually caused other people in the church to step up as new leaders. And it's completely, what they thought was fracturing the church was actually causing it to multiply. So now all these cool Chinese services are happening online through Zoom and Google Hangout and all these things where they're celebrating the name of Jesus and they're inviting lost people in to sing this forbidden song about Jesus. And I think it just so perfectly portrays Psalm 96, 1-3. Sing to the Lord a new song. Sing to the Lord, all the earth. Sing to the Lord, praise his name. Proclaim his salvation day after day. Declare his glory among the nations, his marvelous deeds among the people. And I think we in America have it so easy, like so easy, where we have gotten to the point where we as Christians have talked non-Christians into celebrating our holiday, so much to the point that we have missed the point of our own holiday. And we've got people all over the world who get it, who still get it, who are seeing these different parts of the character of God and are doing these incredible things and giving to the poor and taking care of people who didn't have a way to celebrate the way that we did, and like in Turkey and England. And then we've got these cultural traditions of do the fun stuff, do the cultural stuff, but also don't miss Jesus, like in Belgium and the Netherlands. And then we've got Congo, who just have an all-out celebration, and they've figured out a way where they themselves can figure out their own thing for God, where they can give everything and celebrate him and give a gift to him and not have it be about them. And we've got China, who just will not stop no matter what, because the gospel is worth it, and they're willing to go to prison to celebrate Christmas. It's not even like they're going this deep theological thing. They just want to sing and celebrate Christmas. And I think there's so many things that we can get from these. And as I was thinking about just the relationship between us and Jesus, really any relationship is built on a reciprocal love, If it's just the person that you know from the grocery store, there might not be a ton of love. You might not really know them. There's a reciprocal thing, or it's not a relationship. It's just that person that knows you, or you know of that person, And any relationship has this reciprocal nature to it. And as we look into Christmas, Jesus came in person for you. And we focus a lot on Easter. We focus a lot on the death and resurrection of Jesus because obviously we should. But also, God himself stepped into human flesh for you. That was uncomfortable, to say it very lightly. That was horrible, to say it in reality. Like, he stepped into a sinful world for you, and he lived an entire sinless life for you, knowing that it was coming to sacrifice, coming to death for you. How can we not celebrate that? How can we get so stuck on the 1964 version of Santa that Coke made up that we miss Jesus, who came to bring us new life, you know? And next week we'll talk a little bit more about practically how we can do some of those things and how we can remember Jesus and what it looks like for us. But also today, I kind of just want to expand our minds, expand our worlds a little bit, and just start thinking about how other Christians are doing this. Because I think there's things that they can learn from us too, you know? I think the generosity of I'm going to save up an entire 3 weeks of income to buy presents for people, or, presents who are willing, or parents who are willing to sacrifice everything just so their kids get a gift on Christmas. There's so much that they can learn from us too, but there's so much we can learn from them because it's all about Jesus. So as the worship team comes up, I want to point out some of the things on this card. So if you guys can pull that card out, fold the bottom and tear it off. The next steps are so simple, everyone can do it, okay? The first thing on here is I'll give Jesus the attention he deserves this Christmas. And I'm not saying start a Congolese parade. I would love it if you did that. Take pictures, invite me. But focus on Jesus. Give him the attention he deserves this Christmas. The second thing here is I'll find a way to take care of the poor over the next 2 weeks. And I think that's something that we have completely missed as Americans. We take care of the poor. That's a big thing in our culture. It's a thing we care about. But on Christmas, that's the day that we have for family. We take care of them another time, you know? And I love the fact that all these other cultures specifically take this time that we celebrate Jesus to also take care of the poor that he came for. And the third thing here is I'll focus more on giving than receiving this year. And I think that's the one that you would expect us to say on Christmas, because that's the one that keeps coming up. But really, how are you giving to people? Not just monetarily, but how are you spending more time with people, more investment in people? How are we living out some of these things that we see these other cultures invest in? So that's my challenge for us today is let's learn from people that heard the game of telephone differently, because they've got the same story from 2,000 years ago, but they have a completely different outworking of it, and let's learn. So God, that's our cry today. Don't let us miss Jesus, please. Frosty the Snowman is great. All the reindeer are great. Charlie Brown is awesome. We've got all these great cultural things that are fun, all these parades and fun things that different cities do, and the giant Christmas tree in the middle of our city that's not really a Christmas tree, but I didn't say that out loud. So many things that we do that are fun, that are good. But Lord, I pray that we would not miss Christmas. I pray that we wouldn't miss Jesus. I pray that we learn from our brothers and sisters around the world, and that we'd be able to really, truly focus on you. Because at the end of the day, you came for us in our brokenness. You came for us when we were dead in our sin. And you brought us life in the form of this baby. You brought us life personally by coming yourself, God. Jesus, we thank you for who you are. We thank you that you died for us, that you paid the price for us, and all we have to do is say yes to that. It changes literally everything about us. Thank you for who you are, Lord. Don't let us miss you today. Amen.